Call the meeting to a
Good
session.
answer. Good answer.
Commissioner Stewart, you leave us the invitation and the pledge.
Please stand and join us. Heavenly Father, again, we thank you for this opportunity to come and serve our citizens. Lord, I just ask that you grant us grace and mercy tonight. Lord, we thank you again to give us wisdom to deal with the business of the county here tonight. We ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight's the July 15th, 2019 meeting. We have numerous chances for the citizens to speak. If you want to speak on any item or citizens to be heard, you fill out a speaker's card with Miss Patty, and you'll given your opportunity. Now we need the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to completely remove item 17 from consent, which is the architectural standards, and schedule a workshop on that. I don't want this to turn into another sign ordinance where we pass something and then change it, and somebody complains, we change it again 5 times. Let's just go ahead and invite everybody in and go over these standards and do it all at one time.
Excellent idea.
So I don't know, when can we schedule a workshop, Justin?
Tomorrow?
Quickly?
It's not a quickly answer.
We can do it later, I guess.
Well, no, you need to do it now, but it depends on when you schedule your September 9th or
Can we take
September
this
the
up during
10th.
Commissioner agenda item
Sure.
time? Let's take it up during that time.
During
the-
commissioner discussion.
The
Yeah.
Commissioner discussion.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to be...
So we're going to table
Table it until Commissioner discussion to schedule the workshop.
okay,
I still want to pull it from the agenda.
pulled from the agenda
And-
and,
Not vote on it tonight at all, but just schedule a workshop.
okay.
Sorry, Greg.
Is your motion to approve the rest of the agenda?
Correct.
Second.
Before you do that, we've added in on agenda item number 14, refinement of the cost. It's not $75,000, it's changed to $1,750.
Good.
A slight difference there. That was a typo. Also, on agenda item number 24, we've added in the zoning map for agenda item 14 for you.
Good. I ordered some of those trees. I was going to start selling them
Yeah.
in the county.
Yeah, so that's it.
We all were. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Citizens to be heard? Awards and presentations. Be a hero to our heroes.
Good evening. This is Donna Clark from the Department of Health here in Wakulla County. I'm going to kind of lead up to the Be a Hero to Our Heroes. We were here a year ago talking about social media with our youth. We run a program about healthy behaviors and healthy relationships. We go into the schools, the community, churches, and have a lesson, a curriculum where we go over this. This past year, my team behind me over here has been very diligent in working with our schools. In October, this young lady right here headed up a cyberbullying, anti-bullying program with the high school as well as both middle schools. Due to Hurricane Michael, though, a event we had in the community park was canceled because it happened the week thereafter Hurricane Michael. After that, she worked with the middle schools doing Wakulla United after Hurricane Michael, where we had WMS and RMS gather together at a football game as well as a basketball game, trying to unite them and say that this is about, not about bullying each other, because there was a lot of that going on from what we were told from the principals. The kids, the youth in classes had made posters about what was anti-bullying to them, and then we displayed those posters at the basketball game and the football game on the fence for everyone to see. It was a remarkable event. Shortly thereafter, we got into Prom Promise. Was it Prom Promise? Prom Promise, and we worked with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I don't know if you were able to see the billboards. There were two of them. One was placed down at the high school, focused on our youth, about making healthy choices. And then there was one here above Bell's that said, have you talked, it was a father-son. It was like, have you talked to your child? Have you let them know what your expectations are? Then additionally, on Prom Promise, we went to Wakulla Lodge, and we had a photo booth set up for the youth to come and take pictures with their dates, their parents. We had Commissioner Thomas there with his daughter. And so this past year, we've done a lot of community events, as much as we can due to the team behind me. We are going on the Department of Health's 6th year of partnering with whoever it is that is hosting the back-to-school events. This year, it's Be a Hero to Our Heroes, along with the Sheriff's Office and the school board. This year, it's going to be held on Saturday, August 3rd. We're still gathering donations, funding, volunteers. We need as many volunteers as possible. But into that, because it's like we have about 4 weeks away, and we're still trying to collect funding, this lady behind me decided she was going to host a softball event in August. And this softball event, I'll let her explain, but it's going to help prepare us for next year's back-to-school event. So on that note, I'm going to introduce to you Quinicia Arnold. She's a health educator, senior health educator, and our community liaison. And she's on fire. She doesn't let me stop. I mean, every month there's a new event, a new idea, anything like this. So I'd like her to be able to share with you what's coming up with our community event in August for next year's back-to-school event. But in the meantime, we do have one coming up on August 3rd that's going to be held at the community center, and we need as many volunteers as we can get.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or good evening rather. So the event, we thought of something that will get the community involved, and we wanted agencies, business partners, whomever, old softball teams, get your old teams together. The teams are going to be, it's a co-ed softball game. It'll be held down at the Rec Park on August 17th. There are some flyers. The first game will start at 9, and then the opening ceremony is going to be at 9:45. We are partnering with the Sheriff's Office, so there will be lunch provided. The teams are going to be of 10 co-ed, so you can it doesn't have to be equal amount of female or males, but we would like to have at least, if you're going to have a team of males, at least have a couple of females on there. It's $50 a team, and those $50 are going to go towards, all those proceeds are going to go to the Be a Hero to Our Heroes for the back to school drive for next year. So that'll kickstart them with the supplies that they need for next school year. It should be fun. It's our first one. It sparked off, I'll give you a brief little bit. It sparked off back in March. My husband actually passed away due to a sudden heart attack, and he wasn't really forthcoming with his health, as a lot of men tend to not tell their wives what's really going on. So with that, he used to work for the Department of Juvenile Justice, and so they played softball with Florida State to sponsor linemen. And so I was like, he liked to do softball, so I thought that we can just bring it together because he also liked the youth and he also liked softball. So let's combine both and give back to an agency where, it'll be beneficial as well. So dust off your softballs, your bats, your gloves, or whatever you have in the storage and come out. And it's going to be annually. Next year, we're going to try to have it in June, since June is geared towards men's health. So that way that it'll be something that we do annually. So hopefully we get a lot of teams and everybody come out. The registration information is on the flyer as well. I have some up front with Miss Patty also.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
I'll move approval of consent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We go to general business.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this agenda item requests board direction regarding the public hearing date to adopt the FY 2019-2020 tentative millage rate, tentative budget, and approval to schedule a public hearing to adopt 2019-2020 final millage rate and final budget on September 23rd, 2019. I'd like to note that currently, due to the school board has the first preference for picking a date, and they've picked September 9th for their board meeting and their hearing on their budget. So therefore, that's the reason we had to move that to September 10th for our first hearing on the budget. And you may want to consider potentially moving our regular meeting, which is on the 9th, move that to the 10th as well, but that is up to
Move the
y'all.
board meeting to the 10th, so we'll have the budget hearing and the meeting on the same night.
Second.
That's number one. Option one, because you have to schedule two other public hearings as well through option one.
Is it option one?
Yes.
Then yeah.
Add
it's
that on
option.
to option one, yes.
Option one. And second on option one?
Yes.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Will it all start at 5 p.m.?
Just like a regular board
Regular
meeting.
board
Just a
meeting.
different day. It'll be on Tuesday. And is that the day we could possibly schedule that workshop? She had to
Yeah.
know this first.
Next item?
Mr. Chairman, the next item is request board approval to adopt the preliminary rate resolution for your solid waste services assessment. I'd like to note the assessment is going to stay the same as last year, which is $196. Given that you have just moved your September 9th meeting to September 10th, an important part of this approval would be to move the public hearing that's scheduled in this resolution to September 10th as
Wish to
well.
adopt the preliminary rate and also move the public hearing to September 10th.
Second.
Any comments? Any items from the citizens? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
The next item, Mr. Chairman, is the same action as the preliminary rate resolution for this time for your fire protection services assessment. This resolution does include a CPI rate increase on the rates from last year. The residential rate last year was $99 per dwelling unit. This is proposed to go to $102. This will set your preliminary rates. You can go down from these rates. You cannot go up. Again, we'd ask that you move the public hearing that's called for in this resolution to September 10th.
To adopt the preliminary rate and move the public hearing to the 10th of
September.
September.
Second.
And again, this, we all agreed that we were just going to let it go by CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, standard index.
Correct.
I'd like to adopt that to be automatic, but it's okay.
Any citizens? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
Bless you.
At this time, Greg,
Here we go.
this agenda item requests board acceptance of the clerk's 2018 annual debt report and the clerk's annual investment report. This is two really good reports, and Greg is going to give you an overview of those reports.
He promised me it'd be better than the audit, believe it or not. Mike, did you hear that? He said it'd be better than the audit.
I was thankful Mike didn't pray about these two reports in his prayer like he did the audit report. I was waiting for that.
If you were doing it, I would have.
Let's go over the debt report real quick. If you have questions, please let me know. I'm going to hit the highlights of the report. On page 4, it's going to be on the screen as well. The county's total outstanding debt at September 30th, 2018 was $9,725,058. Compared to the prior year, which was $8,882,000, that's an increase of $842,000 over the year. We'll get into the details of how that occurred and why throughout the report. But primarily, it is the EMS fire facility at Trice Lane. We paid $458,741 in principal reduction last year, 17-18, and $82,998 in interest. So a little over $500,000 in debt service payments in total, which is a good number for cash flow reasons. We'll get into that further later in the report. The governmental, we divide the governmental activities from business activities. Business activities is your sewer and solid waste. They are supposed to make money instead of breaking even or being funded by general fund dollars. So your governmental activities debt total is only $2,169,000 compared to the $1,265,000. I'm still at the bottom of page 4. in the prior year. Again, that difference is your EMS fire facility funded out of the 1 cent sales tax. Your business debt decreased from $7,617,000 to $7,555,000 because of a single payment on your landfill of $61,000. Page 5 is just a couple charts showing what we just went over, very high level on outstanding debt, and then by type. Your bonds is your biggest amount. That's the USDA bonds issued in $6,816,000 for the wastewater treatment plant expansion. And then you've got notes of almost $2.4 million and a small capital lease for motor graders of $530,000. Top of page 6, it's outlines it by lender, and I'm not going to go over those, but we have primarily 4. Caterpillar, Ameris, Hancock Bank, and USDA. Not going to hit the highlights there on page 6 that just gives you the detail of every one of those loans, the interest rates, when it will be paid off, and if you have any questions on those, I'll be happy to entertain that. Page 7 gives a brief debt history. What we do is typically a 10-year look back and a 10-year look forward. And so this is somewhat of a 10-year look back. And on the bottom of page 7, you have a little chart that shows that in 08, 09, 09, 10, and 10, 11, you had about $8 to $8.5 million in total debt. You'll notice that in the middle years from 11, 12 to 15, 16, that dropped to below $3 million in 1 year. And now because of the USDA loan of $6.8 million, we've now climbed back in 16, 17, and 17, 18 to that $8.8 and $9.3 million. So we'll get into the averages later on another chart, but whether or not that's a sufficient amount or too high, or whether we can afford that kind of debt. Our average over the 10 years is $7,014,000 and some change across the 10-year period. We've reduced the total number of obligations from 12, which was the highest in 2008, to 6 in 2018. So we have fewer number of loans, even though the amounts are a little bit about the same. The average maturity has gone up because of that USDA loan, which won't be paid off until 2057. A 40-year, it was a 40-year loan. I don't know who's going to be commissioner still then, but you'll have to worry about that in 2057. So we've gone from a 5.9-year average maturity to a 17-year average maturity in our debt. Debt service payments on page 8. You have a chart at the top, debt history, a 10-year debt history, and then your debt service payments chart at the bottom. The annual debt service payments have averaged $2.2 million per year over the last 10 years. And as I think you already heard me say it once before, last year was just over $500,000. So we have, the year before, we've drastically reduced our cash outflow for debt service payments. The average is 2.2, and last year was 541,000. So there's two ways to look at that. We're not spending very much on debt service, but that also, those same dollars, the other $1.7 million is now can be used in operating to offset operating costs. So it helps with cash flow. Page 9 on debt planning. We have a debt service policy, and that policy requires us to meet the clerk's office, the county administrator, and the budget officer to meet if we're going to issue debt, if we're planning on issuing debt. And so that is to talk about how we can fund it, and how we're going to save most money or spend the less in interest in that release of debt. So the page 9 talks about the debt planning of the county and our current debt retirement schedule. We're going to jump to page 10. One loan was paid off in 17-18 last year. That was the Hancock Bank Courthouse Renovation A loan. We have a Renovation B loan that is still outstanding. That is on the next bullet point. It is planned to be paid off in March of 2021. David and I have talked about possibly paying that one off early, depending on whether or not we can cash flow it with 1-cent sales tax. We'll save about $25,000 in interest if we pay that one off early. It lists the other scheduled payoffs for the others, and as I was joking, 2057 would be the $6.8 million bonds.
So, wait.
Yes.
Okay. The sewage treatment plant, we borrowed $7 million. We're going to pay that back out of access fees?
That is, that's where that comes from, is from access fees, yes,
Okay.
that payment will be.
And do we have capacity in that $7 million? Do we have enough capacity in this plant that we can pay for this?
You're talking about as far as?
Number of houses you add up, you know.
Probably not.
So you get $4,000 or $5,000 a house that you add on. That means you have to have $1 million. Your number's there.
Well,
That's the number.
yeah, but the problem is you have to before you pay this plant off, before this plant's paid off, we'll actually go in debt to purchase another plant. So it'll be a rolling number. And what we're going to look at is the next one. We will not qualify for a USDA loan for the next phase, which we're getting ready to start the engineering. Bring that to you guys for our next increase to plant. What we're considering doing is actually not paying this loan off due to its very, 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 very low interest rate, and paying the next plant off potentially, and or paying a big portion of that. So we haven't determined all of that yet, but that's what we're looking at. But all of that is paid for via access fees. Plant is paid for via access fees, capital expenditures on the plant.
Yeah, I'm just curious, do we have enough
Well,
can we get enough money from access fees to pay this loan?
$6 million divided by
Yes,
$5,000 each. There's 1,200 hookups you need. If they're 200 gallons per day, it's 240,000 gallons.
They have enough.
MGD.
Yes, there is enough. Like I say, we have to play is really what we're looking towards now. Is the next plan is paying as much of that off, because we know we won't get this type of interest rate.
And
so we got to figure out which one we want to pay off first.
And you've pledged your operating revenues, not just your access
That's
fees.
right.
So you've pledged to the
pledged to
USDA
pay
that
this off, so-
all sewer fees, whether it's access fees, if the access fees don't cover it, your operating fees are going to have to cover it. So,
Don't forget, this also upgraded the plant to AWT standards, since we're all environmentally conscious up here. That was a big chunk of money to upgrade
Big
the
chunk of
plant.
money to go, and also that takes a lot of operating.
A lot more hours you got to
A
be.
lot more hours on the operating side. A lot more hours.
But the fund is solely paying for the debt,
Yes.
That's
not
correct.
general revenue.
no
So-
taxes,
Not.
So if
That's
citizens
right.
are not on.
That's correct.
County sewer, then they're not repaying this debt with their
That's right.
tax dollars.
that's correct. It's sewer fee driven,
And
either
we-
access fees or operating revenue, one of the two.
We've done a very good job of making each fund solvent amongst itself. So therefore, it's not dependent upon the general fund. The fire fund's no longer dependent upon the general fund. All these particular funds now are operating as their own business
Enterprise.
entities.
Took a while to get there, but
That's right. It took a while to get there, but we're there now. So that makes it to where it doesn't affect the general fund. So, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the general fund is responsible for all
Ultimately,
funds.
everything.
it's for all,
That's right.
it's responsible for all debt.
That's right.
If any of the others default, the general fund will have to cover it, but we do not expect that.
That's right.
The bottom of page 10, we have mentioned two future anticipated debt expenditures or borrowings. The first one is the county administration complex. when DOT widens the road and takes the buildings on the east side of the road. We don't know how much we're going to get for that, and we don't know how much it's going to cost to replace those buildings. But it's highly unlikely we're going to have enough cash sitting around just to drop cash to cover the entire expenditure, even with the funding from DOT.
Unless they paid us like they did for that fire station.
If they pay us like they did the fire station, yes.
No debt.
So, depending on where you put the building, location, I know you've already started that conversation, and what kind of building it is and how much it costs. It's on our radar, but there's no way to put a dollar amount on it right now. But
Which will be the,
we anticipate probably having to at least discuss borrowing for that expenditure.
and the property appraiser and the supervisor of relations.
All of those
potential, yes.
locations, yes. As David already mentioned, we just finished expansion to advanced wastewater treatment standards, and now we're going back and we're using Gulf Triumph, is it Gulf Triumph or Restore?
Restore Act.
Restore Act dollars to retrofit the first train to advanced wastewater, and as soon as we get that done, what's on our radar already is having to expand to a third train. So you'll have 1.2 million gallons. You'll have to probably go to 1.8 or
1.8 or higher.
higher.
Have a spray field for that.
And so we already have on our radar, before we ever get this other one paid off, the USDA loan paid off, whether we want to pay it off or not, we're going to already have to be expanding the system again.
And David, you're already looking for spray field, right?
We already need a spray field.
Yeah, yeah.
We're right for now, but if we go any further, we're going to need a
Yeah,
spray field.
yeah. We got
So that's on the radar for the future possible debt. On page 11, we have a chart and a graph that shows the combined 10-year debt history and a 10-year debt projection. And you can see the large drop-off right there before 16-17. The 10 years is in between 17-18 and 18-19. And you see, again, we have no anticipated borrowings that we can put on paper because we don't know what the costs are. And so the bar is going down. The previous 10-year average was 7 million, 7.01, and the future 10-year is average 7.36. So it's very close. Even though the two sides of the chart look totally different, the averages are very similar. On the next page, page 12, this is what I was talking about earlier with cash flow. It's the same thing, but this is an analysis of 10 years of debt service payments, past and future. And so, again, the 10-year period is in between, and I found an error on my chart. I'm going to have to send you a new graph. Y'all did not catch this.
You don't need to send it.
I tested you, and you didn't catch it. The graph only goes to 24-25. It should go to 27-28. The chart does go to 27-28, but I didn't fix the graph.
Not a big error.
Oh well.
It's only a few years.
I caught it. Nobody else caught it.
I caught it. I didn't
You
want to
caught
say
it. You just didn't want. You didn't want to embarrass me. Yeah, I understand. So the prior 10 years, the average is 1.630, and then the next 10 years, the average is 591, and that's what I was talking about. You've got almost $1 million a year on average of cash flow that now can be put towards operating expenditures and covering additional cost that you were previously paying to a vendor for debt service. So the cash flow has completely changed, and that's what's really fixed fund balance in a lot of ways, because our debt service payments are much more in line with the way they ought to be, and we've extended those out for many more years, and the USDA 40-year loan allowed us to do that. Page 13. What we do is we do 3 analysis on our debt service, and so there's probably people in the audience and on TV wondering, well, $9 million is a lot of money, and it's a lot of debt, and is it too much? Well, that's your decision to make. As I said, we have a debt service policy, and in that policy, we have 3 standards that we sort of follow. The first one is outstanding debt per citizen or per capita, and that's every child, it's everyone. And the policy says that we won't exceed $500 per citizen. So given the 31,943 estimated population from, I think that came from, is it Bieber or EDR? I'm not sure which one it is. But based on that, we would, our self-imposed debt limit is almost 16 million. And so we're well below that self-imposed debt limit. Our 17-18 per capita debt was $304.45. So every citizen, if you sent them a bill for the total amount of debt that the county owes, would be $304. To give some comparison to that, the next paragraph at the bottom shows that the average federal debt per person is $68,000. The average Florida state debt is $6,000, and the average personal debt that is $59 or almost $60,000. That's according to the U.S. debt clock at the date of publishing of this report. So in total, that's $134,000 per person in our county, and $304 of it is because of our local. Yeah, if you want to write a check for $304, I'll put it in a fund and we'll pay down the debt. Page 14, nobody's getting their checkbooks out. Page 14, debt service expenditures to total operating expenditures. This, again, it has to do with that cash flow. The policy says that we won't spend more than 15 cents of every dollar on debt service payments. So the governmental debt service has averaged 3.82%. We expect that in the future to drop to less than 1%. The business debt service ratio has been averaging 14%. So the sewer fund has been right there at that cap of 15. 5 of the last 10 years have actually exceeded the 15% benchmark. And so the refunding of the sewer loans with the USDA has fixed that, and it's now dropped to around 5%, and we expect that to be the same for the next 10 years or so, unless we borrow more, and we've already mentioned those possibilities. The final benchmark is on page 15. It's what's called a debt service coverage ratio, and it simply looks at your operating revenues to see if you're bringing in enough operating revenue to cover your debt service payments. The industry standard is 1.1 to 1.2, and that's both credit rating agencies and the banking industry. They look at, if they'll before they'll loan you money, are you bringing in enough revenue? And so for every one of the funds we look at that owes money, we look at the debt service coverage ratios. I'm not going to bore you any more than I already have, but the debt service coverage ratio is complicated because capital funds, you can't make a comparison really, because your 1 cent sales tax, you collect all this revenue and you don't spend much of it, and you save it and you collect it again for another year and you don't spend it, and then you turn around in 1 year and you spend all of it at one time on a large capital expenditure, and so your outlays of that revenue spike in 1 year. And so if you look at any one given year, your expenditures will far exceed the revenues that you brought in. And so it can get complicated. You've got on the bottom of page 16, in the red are the years where we did not meet our debt service coverage ratio, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of those numbers, but we've tried to correct those funds and get them in a more operational manner. That's the debt report.
One of the key
Did I do better than the auditor?
One of the key things I think that the public and everyone needs to understand is is the debt that we have currently is not operating debt. It's all capital. So
That's
therefore,
correct.
we're not like the federal government. We don't borrow money to operate. This is
correct.
an actual.
The debt policy actually prohibits us from borrowing to operate
So
our operating
and this was
expenditures.
for buying assets for the county. is what
You
it
and the
said.
auditor ever get together, y'all would put on one hell of a show.
It's a party, yeah, I'm
Hey,
telling you.
His next presentation, if y'all have more questions, is the annual investment report.
Yeah, I'm only halfway done.
Oh, no, Greg.
Now we have the investment report. Any questions?
Got the reporter back.
So, that's the bad news, the debt. The good news is the investments. We have very good, strong fund balances. Jump to page 7 on the investment report. The first 6 pages highlights the policy. I'm not going to bore you with the policy. On page 7, at September 30th, 2018, we had total cash and investments of over $15 million, compared to almost $12 million the year before. And so we increased our cash position in total across all funds, restricted and otherwise, $3.3 million over the prior year. Because of that, we are able to invest the surplus funds, the funds we don't need today to pay for today's bills. We are able to invest that, and we changed our investment strategy this past year and added 2 governmental investment pools that the state of Florida authorizes us to invest in. And so to highlight, just basically 9/30/18, our investment income was $162,000. The prior year was $87,000. So we almost doubled. I think it was a $74,000 increase in 1 year in our investment income. Bottom of page 7 shows you the investment accounts, the restricted savings accounts. For example, the SHIP money is in a restricted savings account, and we can't invest it. It has to stay in an account, and it just sits there and earns practically nothing. Page 8 highlights and in more detail that $15 million, and at the bottom of page 8 you'll see that there's 2 investment pools, Florida Class and Florida FIT. Those are acronyms for governmental investment pools, and we had $4 million sitting in those accounts, and they were earning a very good interest rate, and that it's averaging right now 2.5%, I believe it is, although I expect that to go down because the Reserve is going to decrease the rate here soon. Page 10, there's a graph. We sort of do a internal comparison as to how we're doing on our interest rates. That top line is the 2-year Treasury yield. We could earn more interest if we would lock up the money for 2 years, but we're not willing to lock it up. All of the investments that we have invested in, we could call today, and the money is back in our account tomorrow. So it's overnight funds, and we're still earning a good interest rate. The orange line is our actual return. And so you see at the beginning of October, November, it was below all of our investment options. Mid-year, we made an adjustment. We opened these other accounts, and you see that we're now earning right along the same rates as you could with the Fed funds rate of the 3-month Treasury yield and the 1-year Treasury yield. And we're doing it without the risk of having it locked up for any more than 1 day.
That's the key for the public also to
And that's the
understand is we can't risk the people's money. We have to have it solvent. So therefore, we could get higher returns, but we have to risk that.
We could definitely get higher returns, but A, you opened the door for more risk of losing principal, which we don't ever want to do, and then you open the door for having it being insolvent, and next thing you know, we've got an emergency or we need to spend the cash, and I can't get it without being penalized. So we forego the interest earnings for the other securities. So that's a highlight of the investment report.
Wonderful.
Anything else, Randy?
No.
Commissioner Merritt, I mean.
Never forget this.
All right.
Thank you, Greg. I get a motion to accept the two reports?
So proudly moved.
Second.
I'm glad that's
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
pulling a prickly pear.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Passes 5-0. Okay, we move to public hearing. Item 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an item to request board approval to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance that would provide for a referendum election to be held on March 17th, 2020, for the purpose of determining whether the Wakulla County Charter should be amended to repeal Section 7.6, which currently requires nonpartisan election of all elected county officials.
Motion to approve, and if you could explain it a little further to the people that may be baffled by this. If there's a second.
Second.
Earlier this year, Wakulla County currently has a charter provision that requires all of the constitutional officers, which includes the clerk, the sheriff, the supervisor of elections, the property appraiser, the tax collector, and the 5 county commissioners to be elected through a nonpartisan election, which means they do not have a party affiliation.
And that was passed by the citizens on a referendum a couple of years ago.
That is correct. Orange County had a similar charter provision, which was recently found to be preempted by general law and struck as being invalid based on that. In order to clean up your charter and to prevent issues with future elections, we're recommending that we put it before the voters and that we educate voters as to the reason why and encourage them to repeal it.
Hopefully they'll pass it.
Yes, if not, we'll have to take
Sue
some...
sue the
Yes.
elections office.
Any citizens' comments? So, well, I don't agree with it. You know, the Supreme Court came out 3 months before approving it. Now they changed their mind. This is what the citizens wanted, so I can't support this, and so just thought I'd let you know. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye.
I
Four
don't
passes.
necessarily want it either, Chuck, but I just think it's something we have to do. Unless you can get the Supreme Court to decide that it is constitutional, then we'll leave it alone.
Yep.
Well, another option, and this could happen, this is not a constitutional issue with such a charter amendment. It's a conflict by general law. So if the legislature did change the law and would allow nonpartisan elections in these circumstances, it could be put back in place. But that would require the legislature to act in the next legislative session.
So this is a home rule question, and that's why I oppose it.
And I agree with you. That should be decided locally by the citizens, but until, we got several, issues where we're preempted by the state, and this is one of them. So until that's cleaned up, our hands are really tied.
And was it like that before we did this?
Yes.
It was. Yeah.
Just that those laws had not been interpreted to apply in this manner, and the Supreme Court recently interpreted it. And as Chairman Hess noted, the configuration of the Supreme Court that heard the case originally found that there was not a preemption. The court then changed because some retired and new justices came on, and they reversed that mandate on their own and found that it was preempted. So it's an unusual situation, and I think that's what your statement was too.
Another option, we could just wait for somebody to sue us, right? Leave it the way it is.
Well, the problem with that is that you have elections coming up, and anyone who lost that election would have a lawsuit, and so you could throw several elections up in the air and put them into judicial jeopardy by not being proactive.
I think it's important to point out, too, that this item is going on a regularly scheduled presidential preference primary, so it's not a special election. We're not having to pay extra for a ballot for just this issue. It's just going to piggyback on that election that's already scheduled.
Okay.
And we could also advocate for our legislature to change the law.
Yes.
So. All right. Do we vote? We did vote.
Yes.
We did. Yep.
Planning and zoning,
Thank you, Mr.
item
Chairman.
23.
The first item is an application for a change of zoning, R1904. John and Petra Schuff are the owners. In accordance with Section 24.01 of the County Code, each commission member needs to disclose any ex parte communications you may have received regarding this application. Commissioner Merritt?
I got a couple calls, talked to Mark, and I talked to Mr. Schuff.
Commissioner Messersmith?
No.
Commissioner Hess?
Yes, I've received numerous emails, and I've talked to a couple of citizens that are affected by it.
Commissioner Stewart?
I've received emails, talked to some citizens and to the applicant.
And Commissioner Thomas?
I spoke to John Schuff, Peggy Mackin, got an email from Elizabeth Roberts, Mark Calloway, and spoke to Mark Calloway.
Okay. And the emails will be provided for the record.
Heather, I need to go backwards about the emails. I forgot to forward them to Summer's office.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll just get those included in the record. In accordance, anyone who's going to provide any information on this application, please stand up to be sworn.
Anybody that's filled out a speaker's card?
Yeah, raise your hand.
If you're going to speak, you need to stand up and...
If you filled out a card, you need...
Is it only on this item?
Yes,
sir,
just
only
on this item for now.
Only on this item.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. So help me God.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Summer.
Yes, this request for rezoning is from agriculture and RR1 to RR2 on 139.13 acres of land located just west of the Wildwood Acres Phase 2 subdivision and north of the Wakulla Middle School. The future land use designation for this property is Rural 2, which was recently adopted by the board on April 15th of this year. The proposed zoning would allow for one home per 2 acres of land with the connection of central water service. Currently, the property is vacant and located within the FEMA flood zone designations of X and AE. The proposed zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code. Notices of the hearing were mailed out to all property owners within a 500-foot radius of the subject property, and the advertisement for this evening's public hearing appeared in the Wakulla News on June 27th. Staff is recommending option 1 for approval and will be happy to answer any questions.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I have numerous citizens. Mr. Chris Russell.
You must be doing it by height. Shortest first. Chris Russell, 92 Pimlico. Okay, this one's pretty easy. Your codes, your regulations already say it can go forward. I know there's citizens that are upset, but the time is not now. The time is to get the codes changed. It's already going through. Your staff has highlighted the challenge of you denying it, that it has to have extreme substance and you have to have a good reason, and there is no good reason. The traffic analysis that's come back so far, not the traffic study, traffic analysis, has it just over 50% at high peak time. That's not bad. The wetlands issue is also, he has a buffer around it that's not required, which I applaud him for doing that myself. So that's some good news there. This one's pretty simple. I'm not sure what P&Z was doing the other night. I served on P&Z, and I'm not quite sure what happened there. I definitely am empathetic to the folks that don't want this, but it's already allowed in the code. So tonight, any of you that vote against this, you're sending a message to the citizens that you are good for us having more liability by not going in their own code, not following their own code. That's not a good thing. You're also sending a message to potential investors in our community that, hey, we will arbitrarily legislate from the bench up here, and we'll change it, no matter what the code. We have fought for years to try to get folks to come down here and invest in our community, and one of the biggest complaints we hear is it's hard to get permits, it's hard to move through. This would only validate that argument. I hope you'll look at it. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you know you've got it. But anyway, likewise, not only that, John is out of the state, already had a prearranged flight, and he asked that Chuck and I come up here and represent him as well. So if anyone has any questions outside after the citizens be heard, let me know. But like I said, just like our Constitution, just like our Supreme Court, don't legislate from the bench, please.
Chuck, don't let them do this. Don't let them talk from the audience.
Excuse me,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Elizabeth Roberts.
Good evening. My name's Elizabeth Roberts. I'm at 128 Wildwood. For years, we have voiced our opinion about the traffic on the road. We had the study, I think some of you received the study from the Wakulla County Sheriff's Office, and it proves that it's a drag strip. We are very concerned. I would welcome you to come to my property when school is in session to see the actual speeding, the traffic. It's backed up all the way to Highway 98. It's a gridlock. If there was something catastrophic that would happen at the middle school, it would be almost impossible. There's one road in, one road out for a school and 3 neighborhoods. With also this involved is the safety of the children. Many times the children have to walk on private property on the side of the road. The buses have a very hard time maneuvering through there if they meet one-on-one. And the situation for the kids and the students. We've had several incidents happen on the road. The sheriff's office will not come out and issue any tickets. So we're kind of at a standstill on our voice and what we can get. The environmental issues, like he stated, if there's a buffer, we haven't been given that information. I don't know if it's public knowledge. I would appreciate it if there was an environmental impact study done on this also. And just consider that we are the residents on the road, and we do have a great concern for our safety in emergency situations. And I would appreciate your vote to vote no on this issue at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Calloway.
Hi, Mark Calloway, 59 Jean Drive, Wildwood Subdivision. I want to thank all of y'all for taking the time to talk to me on the phone or in person and listen to my complaints, and I appreciate y'all's input. Again, my problem is with the traffic. Mr. Schuff at the Planning and Zoning meeting stated that the traffic is going to be routed down Jane Drive and it won't affect me and it won't affect the people on Wildwood. That's irregardless of the point. The point is we have a dangerous subdivision intersection now that's well beyond capacity. The traffic analysis that was brought up at the Planning and Zoning meeting is a farce. When you've got real numbers that Mrs. Roberts had the Sheriff's Department do from 5 years ago, and we show a student increase, we also now have 3 home daycares in the neighborhood that provide extra traffic, plus all the maintenance services and everything that go in and out every day. We have a problem now with traffic. If the county is going to do something to alleviate that traffic, it needs to be done now, not later after we already put the cart before the horse. And that's kind of what I feel like we're doing, is we're going to go ahead and give someone a permission to vote or to do what they want with their land, and then we'll worry about the consequences for it later. It's not in my interest to stop Mr. Schuff from developing his land, but I do think that it needs to slow down a little bit and let's find a different egress into his property. He's been offered a way in and out. He chose not to take that route. That's not my call, that's his. The gentleman that he talked to gave him a number, and he decided he didn't want that number. That was cost prohibitive. So we're putting a number on what's going to affect people's lives that live in a community and have lived in this community for a number of years. And I think that needs to be looked at. You know, in your quasi-judicial responsibilities as a board, it should also include the common sense to look at the people that are going to be most affected by this neighborhood. You know, I'm not asking Mr. Shuff not to develop his land, but I am asking it to stay at the agricultural and 1 for 5. I would appreciate any considerations we could get from you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Walt Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Walt Dixon, 97 North Lake Eden Lane. I was one of the original developers that developed the golf course and the subdivision there at Wildwood on Gina Drive. Kent Deed developed that previously to that. But I'm here to ask you to approve this zoning. I know John has worked with the fellow he just talked to about a right-of-way. John's also talked with some other people to try and acquire another right-of-way into the property. So at this stage, nothing is set in stone. What we're here tonight is to approve a zoning change, and I'm urging you commissioners to approve the zoning change. You know, we got a lot of people moving to Wakulla County for 2 reasons. Low crime rate, excellent school system. And we haven't approved a good subdivision in south of Crawfordville in a long time. They've all been located elsewhere, but we got 3 excellent school systems south of Crawfordville, starting with, well, the middle school, the Muddart Elementary School, and our award-winning Wakulla High School. So I urge you to please consider rezoning this property to 2 acres, and I'm sure Mr. Shuff will work with his neighbors there to try to come up with something that's hopefully more feasible. We understand about the traffic on Gina Drive, and maybe with something that can work out down the road. I urge you tonight that to vote for this zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Priscilla Ingram.
My name is Lasala Ingram, and I live at 82 Jane Drive. We've lived there now for 13 years. I love our small community. It's a quiet community. It's a community with a lot of small children. I know Mr. Shuff doesn't care about that. All he cares about is the money he'll make with his development. There is a dirt road that runs behind the school. Now, if Mr. Shuff really wants this development to go through, I don't want him on my road, because we've got small children. We've got animals that sometimes cross there. But if Mr. Shuff really wants this development, let him pave that dirt road and get his people in and out, rather than coming through our small community. Also, I have a real problem with this 500-foot notice. Mr. Shuff, I don't know if he lives there, but he should know that there are over 100 households that are affected by this change. That's people coming and going every day. Now, it's worse when school's in, beginning and ending. But we have a real problem with accidents almost happening. Now, the only way y'all can really help with that is improve our roads in Wildwood Acres, too, and put up a traffic stoplight. Was Mr. Shuff going to pay for that traffic stoplight? Because right now, we are making do coming and going. But the only way with more traffic, and you're talking probably 100 vehicles in the morning, and most every household of those acres that he wants to put, they're going to be working. They're going to be leaving at the same time school's starting. So we've got a real problem with exiting our community. And the only way y'all are going to be able to help with that is putting up a stoplight. How much does that cost a year? I think that Mr. Shuff should be made to pave that dirt road so that we are not subject to all of the traffic that'll be coming and going out of that subdivision. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Joy Fetter?
Hi, I'm Joy Fetter. I live at 154 Jean Drive. The road where it's going to go in is going to be right by my house. So I'm going to have to listen to the traffic after not listening to the traffic, because at 10 o'clock at night, you don't hear nothing. You hear the hoot owls, and that's it. So I'm going to have that going back and forth right by my house. Another thing, that school, when it lets out, they block that road. You have to go on the other lane and go around trying to get into that school. Now, how about the heavy trucks that's going to bring in the wood and all the equipment to build houses back there? They're going to go down our road. Our payment's only about this thick. So, you know, what are they going to do the damage to our roads? You know, that's going to be extra equipment for them coming in to build the houses. I mean, I just can't see it. And plus the traffic getting out. My husband leaves every morning to get out, to go to work. It's a nightmare to even, I don't even make a doctor's appointments that early, so I don't have to go out that way that early. You know, it's just bad. And so, you know, Jean Drive, we only got one way in and one way out, you know, and I just can't see it, you know, running through our little community like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Robinson.
Chuck Robinson, 103 Wildwood Drive. First, before I begin, I want to say hello, neighbors. We are living in a great community, so anything I say, please just accept it as, you know, it's just a differing opinion. And I hope that we can continue to be great neighbors. Okay? All right. When my wife's been teaching here for over 20 years, and she got sick of the drive from Tallahassee to the high school. So she nagged and nagged, and then we moved into Wildwood. We were looking for a neighborhood that had great neighbors. We could afford it. It had great access to the beach and all kinds of different things. It was quiet. That was one important thing. And then also low to no crime. And bingo, we found it. We found it in November of 2007, and if you'll recall, the following year, you know, got a little bit rough, but so we bought high. But regardless, we still have a cherished feeling about our neighborhood in our heart. And as also to remind everyone, if you do see the blue truck, that's mine. It's getting moved. You can have it if you want it. So I know that several people have mentioned John. Look, I've known John since the day I moved to Wakulla. I got heavily involved in the Chamber of Commerce and several other organizations, and I hope that most of you know that I've served in several capacities and have maybe by this time, after 12 years, become an honorary citizen of Wakulla. I know it's hard, but...
made it yet.
Yeah, not yet? Okay. But I've worked, you know, side by side with John in so many different projects, and with Petra as well at the Chamber, that I can really say that they are honorable people. They are not going to lie to you. They're not going to try to scam you. If John has a question, or if you have a question for John, you may have to go into the weeds with him, and he'll eventually get an answer out of you. You get the answer you want, but that's how John operates. And I know a lot of our neighbors mentioned that they're stressed about the traffic. I know leaving in the morning is a bit weird, and I'm using this weird as an example. But most of our good neighbors, I think, have come up with a code of traffic, if you will. If you approach the intersection of Wildwood and 98 in the morning, it's almost like you could see who's coming in at what time, and there's a pattern to everything. I think a lot of that would also help if the school zone was widened, the slow down bit, so that way you have more cars that can actually filter in, but that's... also, most of our great neighbors miss the afternoon buses because they actually come in well, I get off at 5. If I'm lucky, I get off at 319 by 6. But this unspoken code I'm speaking of has actually helped. If I have to pull out, I'm looking behind me at Jean Drive and Wildwood at the same time, and it's been easy. I know there's certain times of the year where it's not easy, and I do appreciate that. And I do recognize the safety factor. Commissioner Howard Kessler, when he was serving, and I think Commissioner Hess mentioned the idea of sidewalks. Should I kind of continue or no?
Thank you.
Thank you, all right. Thank you.
Dr. Hazel Walker.
I'm Hazel Walker, and I live on Jane Drive. I have a couple concerns. One, we have not seen an actual road use study. In the mornings when I go out, I have sat on Jane Drive. The longest I have waited to turn onto Wildwood has been 45 minutes, especially if there's a bus on the road. I come from a family of paramedics and doctors and all, and in most communities, when you have a school, you have more than one way to get emergency services into and out of. Most accidents occur on the way to school or on the way home. Currently, they're using Wildwood Drive only. If you're going to be adding 136 acres, and most of those families will have 3 to 4 cars, there will be boats on trailers, and so that's greater than what Wildwood is now by over 150 some percent. So my 45 minutes may go to 90 minutes to get out. And if you need somebody to come in to take care of a child that's been hurt on the playground, there's only one way in, and they're going to stand on 98 waiting to get in. When a school bus comes down Jane Drive, cars pull over onto the grass because you cannot get the school buses. We let the school buses take precedence. So there needs to be a real road use study all hours of the day, and there needs to be emergency services for the children and the citizens done. And thirdly, there needs to be an accurate, not just a buffer for water to go to, but a complete water use for that area, since there are no sewers at this time. So I would ask for this to be tabled until you are certain you can provide emergency and correct road use for that many people. Also, in the notice that we live more than 500 feet away from the property. Most people do because it's rural, so a lot of us never got a notice until a neighbor gave it to us. But there was wording in there that said a minimum of 60 houses. I'd like to know what their maximum is. It said minimum of 60 houses.
Can you answer that real quick,
Yeah.
please?
The notice that is provided by the department to the applicants is detailed in the county code of what is required to be included in that, and it did not include a minimum number of
What is the maximum
dwelling.
he could put on?
The maximum under the land use is 56 units.
But, so now that gives you more cars because I was multiplying by 60. My background is on some of those areas. I know when they were putting in the walkway out 98, we were very concerned with what was happening to the natural water that's along 98 right off Wildwood. And I was told, well, sweetie, a little girl like you, you don't need to worry about that. But I now see green sewer that's ruined.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Okay, that's the last citizen to be heard. Any board discussion?
I wanted to say, I told Mark I would look at what he emailed me, which is, this is actually, the Community Traffic Safety Team ordered this study because of citizen concerns. You know, I'm the board representative on the Community Traffic Safety Team. They went out and measured the speed because there were concerns about speeding on Wildwood Alley. I'm just going to read the results. I'm not going to argue with anybody about it. The average speed was 27 miles an hour. This is over 11/17/2014 from 6 a.m. to 11/18/2014 to 10 p.m. All right, 2 full days. And these are school days, Monday and Tuesday. Average speed 27. 85th percentile, which is what we look at a lot of times, was 33. So at this point, would this qualify for traffic calming devices under our policy? Okay. Now, the number of vehicles over that 2-day period is 926. Okay? If you multiply that by 2, that's divide by 2, that's 463 cars per day. Okay? This is the DOT level of service. Mac, you've probably seen one of these before, based for rural roads. For uninterrupted flow roads, rural, undeveloped, 2-lane, undivided, which is what that is, the level of service B is 4,700 cars per day. Now, this one, and I think that's a little high, but let's just say you take a third of that or a fourth of that. Right now, it's at 463 cars per day. And the Institute of Traffic Engineers, me and Summer looked it up earlier today, they put out a, Mike, you're familiar with that too, whatever development you're going to do, be it a McDonald's, be it a subdivision, be it a Walmart, it tells you how many trips per day are supposed to be generated from that. And on the, for a 30, I did it for 60 acres, I think it was roughly around 450. So it is probably going to double the traffic on there. But still, it's within, and I know it's going to be changed the way traffic's out there. But our standard of review is there compelling documented evidence that you could produce if we were sued to say it's better to leave it ag than to give the guy what he's asking for? If we can't have compelling documented proof, then we're almost compelled to approve it. I mean, we're going to expose the county. Ma'am, please don't talk Melanie. Ma'am, please. So, out of respect for Mark and Sherry, I know them for a long time. I told him I would look at it. I did. And my conclusion is that I'm going to support it. Now, they had good point about the paving that road, that dirt road that goes to the back of the middle school. It's, I assume Wildwood Alley is what we're talking about. Wildcat, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, that's a private road. It's not a county road. So even if we've tried to get it, look at getting it paved several times to the community traffic safety team to give people an access. I think people that take their kids to baseball practice, for example, park back there anyway. And it'd be a great second access to the middle school. I completely agree with that 100%. But it's a private road. If it was a county road, we would have already paved it a long time ago. So having us or the applicant come in and pave that road is just not realistic. It doesn't belong to the county. It's not a county road. And Mike, you remember when we paved Gene and Jane Drive back when they were dirt, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And I have one more question for Summer, then I'll shut up. On the original Wildwood Phase 1, is the applicant using a piece that was intended for future access? In other words, is it a 60-foot wide access, or is he just using a lot?
It is, it's a lot.
Okay.
It is a 60-foot wide lot at its most narrow point.
Okay, so he's actually going through a lot and not a future
That's
access.
correct.
Okay. That's my position. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. We can talk after the meeting, but we can't do it at the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can I just have 1 minute? I just want to follow up on a couple points on the standard of review that have been hit on by Commissioner Merritt and also by one of the speakers, and just to get it out there for the record. Under the standard of review for rezonings and for many of your quasi-judicial decisions are that the property owner has the initial burden of proof to show that their proposal is consistent with both the comprehensive plan and with our code. Once this is done, there is a prima facie case, which means they've met their initial burden, that the owner is entitled to the rezoning, and the burden would then shift to the county. As Commissioner Merritt mentioned, the local government then has the burden to demonstrate that maintaining the existing zoning classification with respect to the property accomplishes a legitimate public purpose. In order to do this, the board must have support its decision with competent substantial evidence. Competent substantial evidence is basically evidence that is sufficiently relevant and material so that a reasonable mind would accept it as adequate to support the conclusion that you made. If you have any other questions about that, we can talk about that. But there is a burden shifting. The initial burden, I believe, has been met here, and so there would be, the burden would be on this board to find competent substantial evidence that maintaining the zoning serves a legitimate public purpose.
Heather, can you further explain what that, towards the end there, you said a reasonable mind?
That is a term that is used by courts all over the place. It's basically something that, in this case, if there was evidence that there was going to be so many trips put on the road, for example, that you were going to trip your level of service standards, or if there was additional evidence that would show there was some other legitimate public purpose, like there was going to be an excessive amount of flooding created or something like that, that a normal person,
Third
which is
party,
a reasonable mind, somebody who's normal, objective, would find that that is evidence that is conclusory enough to support the decision that you guys made to deny. And that's what a court would look to.
I do. Mr. Chairman, I just had a question for Summer. I heard a couple comments that stated that the Planning Commission reviewed a transportation study. I don't know if that's correct, but I wanted to ask that, or if you could elaborate on the process of when a traffic or transportation study will come into play on this particular property.
Sure. The Planning Commission reviewed the document that I believe Mr. Callaway sent to Commissioner Merritt that was conducted by the Community Traffic Safety Team. So this was the same document that Commissioner Merritt discussed. So that was what the Planning Commission saw. When we reviewed for transportation concurrency, whether it's for a residential project or a commercial project, that comes in during the site plan or the preliminary plat stage of the development when an applicant is making an application for a specific development plan approval, whether that's for, you know, a new shopping center or whether it's for a 10-lot residential subdivision. At that point, we know what should be analyzed from a traffic standpoint and can include that into our concurrency management spreadsheet.
So before any homes are built, you're going to take a look at the impact of traffic, compare it to the data that Randy just pulled up, the level of service and the accepted industry standards of whether or not the road should be able to accommodate that, and a decision will be made before any plat plan approval will be granted.
That is correct.
Okay.
And I wanted to add one more thing, if I could, just so everybody knows. When I looked at this, I did so as I'm a civil engineer, a PE, as you guys know, and I ran the public works for 10 years. So I halfway know what I'm talking about.
I got one thing, Mr. Chairman, before we... Quincy, you got...
No. I only had the one question about the 56 units and the 60 units. Can you tell me that one more time?
Yes. So under the existing land use density allowance, the overall parcel could not receive more than 56 dwelling units.
But it can be under that.
But it can be under that, correct.
I'm against it, and this is my reasonable mind, if you will. Why I was against it before when it came up for the same reasons now is that and I'm fine with the subdivision, everything except the ingress and egress. That's what I have a problem with, and I discussed that with Mr. Shuffin here, and I discussed it with him personally when we talked about it, about finding another way in and out of there. Here's the problem I have, folks, is that if you think about when it's already a poorly designed subdivision that exists, in my opinion, but that was done eons ago, okay? So we got to live with that. But then we added Wildwood in, so we built more homes, which loaded more cars onto that one exit out onto 98. Now we're discussing going into a landlocked area that is only accessible through Jane or Jean Drive, and now remember, those both can only empty onto 98 at one place. So those all tie in back together. Now we're allowing this landlocked area to subdivide and populate that road even more. So I guess my reasonable mind says that if we continue to let landlocked areas like we're doing with Wildwood and the existing subdivision there and now this new one, what if another one comes along that they have bought the land further in that allows another 50 or 60 houses? I mean, at what point do we say enough's enough? Yes, sooner or later the traffic study will probably support. But to say we don't have a traffic problem out here on 319 is not a reasonable mind to me. You could say that because the traffic study says there's not a traffic problem on 319, but I challenge anybody with a reasonable mind to try to get on 319, and you can hardly do it. So I guess my point and why I'm going to vote against this particular subdivision is just that reason, is because it only has one egress and ingress into it. And so I think that's reasonable. It's probably going to pass anyway tonight, but I'm not going to vote for it, and that's the reason why.
So, you know, I've been opposed to this subdivision for since the beginning. As Mr. Stewart, Commissioner Stewart points out, is there's only one ingress and egress, and this is a public school. This is the only access point to our school in this area. That's just, that's not right. And then you put all these extra houses. Randy said 400 houses. If he looks at the next page, okay, of that traffic stuff, 400 trips. Okay.
Well, that's what the DOT ITE manual came up with.
I'm just looking at the next page of that transportation study. Oh,
I don't have the other page.
The next page shows that it was 600.
That was a 3-day time period.
That was a 3-day time period.
Correct.
Over
Still
600.
averages 400 cars a day.
Over 3 days, it was 600 cars a day. Okay.
I thought it was like 12. I don't want to argue about it, but I was thinking it was.
It was
like
870.
over
Okay.
a 3-day period.
1,870 over 3 days. So that's 600 cars a day.
Yeah, I think he's right about that.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
And so, and then you add these on top of it, and getting out on the 98, that's just going to become impossible. I can't, he needs to put in another access point for this development. My other problem is that we need to, the people that, if this gets approved and have to buy in there, they're going to spend their money on a septic tank, and within 10 years, they're going to have to replace it. I don't think that's appropriate. And so, somebody's going to pay for it. Who's going to pay for that septic tank in 10 years? Is it going to be the county funds? Is it going to be the individual? Or is it, or our tax dollars to the state? Somebody's going to pay to, if we're going to clean up Wakulla Springs, somebody's going to pay to replace those septic tanks within the next 10 years. And so that's not, that's not appropriate for this development to move forward in that situation. And I have one other problem with this, is that when this was advertised, the sign was put on the property. And if you look at where that sign was put, nobody would have ever seen it. 1 or 2 houses are back there. Okay, that's the only people that would have ever seen that sign. So if we're going to have this situation, we need to make sure that at the comp plan change, we do the same type of advertisement we do for a zoning change. And so that needs to be in our ordinance as we move forward.
Sounds like an agenda item.
That does.
I mean, I don't disagree with that, but we can't hold someone to a standard that doesn't exist because it should exist. It's like enforcing a speed limit.
That's not why I'm holding, that's not my reasoning. My reasoning is the access point and the septic tank. So, anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Passes 3. All again, opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-2. Okay. Next one's application for zoning 1906.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for a change of zoning, R 1906. Gene Cutchin and Robert Parrish are the owners. Urban Catalyst Consultants are the agent. In accordance with Section 24.01 of the County Code, each commission member needs to disclose any ex parte communications you may have received regarding this item.
I think I've talked to Gene about it, but I'm not sure.
And I haven't talked to him about it.
I have had numerous email contact with individuals living in the area.
I've spoke to 2 citizens, a couple emails. I don't think I've talked to the applicants since the last meeting.
I spoke to Gene prior to the last meeting, not since. Since then, I've spoken to Alan Reese and also emailed with Alan.
I spoke with Alan also and Eugene Watkins on this.
Okay, and if there's any emails that we need to get into the record, please make sure those get to the planning staff. If there's anybody here who's going to provide any information on this application, please stand up to be sworn. Raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
This agenda item requests the board approval for a change of zoning application from agriculture to PUD, planned unit development, on 72.11 acres of land located in the northeast corner of the Wakulla-Aaron Road, East Ivan Road intersection. The future land use designation of urban fringe was adopted April 1st of this year by the Board of County Commissioners, which allows 2 dwelling units per acre with central sewer and water connection. The proposed PUD would allow for the residential development of 141 single-family detached units, will provide 3 entrance and exit points from existing county-maintained roadways. Off-street parking and paved roads will be provided to the site, as well as open space and recreation areas throughout the development. Stormwater will be contained and treated on-site in accordance with all state and local laws. The property exists along the easternmost boundary of the Crawfordville Town Plan and is currently vacant. The majority of this property lies within FEMA flood zone designation of X. However, there is a small area of identified A zones. Central water and sewer will be provided to the proposed development, and this application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the land development code. Mail notices were sent regarding the public hearing to all property owners within a 500-foot radius of the subject property, and the advertisement appeared in the Wakulla News on June 27th of this year. Staff is recommending option 1, which is approval of the zoning ordinance and approval of the order approving the development plan. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
To approve.
Okay, I have 2 citizens to speak. Mr. Gary Haig.
Hand up for each of you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Haig. I live at 40 Garner Circle East, and that's right down the road from this project. I submit to you that you may not approve the concept plan and the zoning for this area. The concept plan is flawed. Their own drawing says that the residential percentage is 79.41% of the area. County code under site development standards stipulates that the residential area shall not exceed 75% of the overall land area. This is in violation of the county code. How the planning department and P&Z can approve this or recommend approval, I don't understand. Furthermore, if you look at the planned recreational space for the development, the conceptual plan says that there's 3.91 acres of open space, but really only 1.97 acres are recreational space. The rest is drainage and 3 small pieces of property stuffed in between residents, which would not be usable by everybody else. Again, Wakulla County Code stipulates that open space and recreation space shall be adequate in size and location to serve the residents of the planned development. Is 1.97 acres enough for 141 homes? This is supposed to be a planned urban development. You know, we're going out there and we're planning that we're going to do this. You know, 141 homes is going to have a minimum of 282 people. My third point is I understand Mr. Cutchin has recently purchased the property and closed on it. The number of acres that he bought was 67 acres. Therefore, the acres in this proposal is at 72. So what changed? How does the public know what changed? What areas? And I say that the whole thing needs to start over again and get the right amount of acres so that everybody has a fair chance to say what they think about this project. You know, you guys were sold a bill of goods because we were told that this was going to be half-acre lots. And, you know, the planning goes down in this. If you look at the development plan, got a whole bunch that are 5,400 square feet. This is going to be another Wakulla Gardens. And I just don't think that we want houses on top of each other. The setback is 5 feet between houses. And, you know, you're going to have water ditches running between the houses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Reeves, Alan Reeves.
Alan Reese, 294 Emerald Acres Drive. I noticed that some are delicately worded that along the eastern boundary of the Crawford Town Plan, which means it's outside the Crawford Town Plan. A lot of what Gary said, I don't want to restate that it started out at 72 acres, now it ends up being a 65 acre, 67.82 acres. And there have been commitments and meetings, everyone understood they're going to be half-acre lots. It figures out to 0.4 acre average, which is less than that. And it was our understanding from discussions that took place in some of these meetings that it'd be not less than a half-acre lot. So if you take that same, and I know there's discussion about the 75%, whether that applies to this particular project or not, but take the 75% and then divide that by the half-acre lots and take the 67.82 acres, that ends up being 101.7 lots rather than 141. So just consider, you know, if you continue or, you know, move this forward, that there's a lot less lots should be on here than what is shown in the plan. Approval of a PUD requires approval of the development plan by yourselves, by the county commissioners. So I assume y'all have all reviewed the standards and approval procedures. 5-55 conceptual landscape plans are not in the package. There's only a narrative in there. 5.553 conceptual drainage plans are not in the package. 5-55, there's no buffering standards included. And you might say, well, they're there. Well, I didn't see them. I went through the package and no one in planning and zoning could show me these items. There were other things that I took issue with that I thought were very weak, but I didn't identify them. I only identified those that were specifically not in there. 5-551, there was no written proof in the file that the person signing is an officer of the corporation. And that's a specific requirement. So will you as commissioners approve a development plan that contains areas of non-compliance? And I'd say, how can you do that? I submit that you can't. You should not approve a development plan because it has to be approved prior to the PUD, and you can't approve it if there's areas of non-compliance in there. So you need to resolve these areas before you can approve this development plan. So I'd submit you'd have to deny it. There's questions as to whether this should even be a PUD zoning or whether it's even appropriate for PUD zoning. I talked to a developer recently that's looking at another piece of property in that area. And I asked him what kind of density. He said, well, he said, I will not do anything less than 1 house per 2 acres. He said, I will not do that to the neighbors. Thank you. You know, someone that is concerned about the property rights of people where you're moving into a neighborhood, rather than just concerned about the property rights of a developer that wants to develop it. Sideline comment, I saw areas within this
Thank you, Mr. Reese.
comp plan that were in conflict also.
Thank you. Again, I got great respect for Alan. I've known him for a long time, but Summer, is the development plan in compliance with the county standards?
Yes.
I'm not saying Alan's wrong.
I went through it with staff.
Have we fixed those things since he met with staff, or were they there and the staff didn't?
The matter of the application has not been amended since it was advertised.
So the number of acres,
I just pulled that up on the
That
property appraiser's website. It does look like it, the property appraiser notes it as being lesser acreage than the 72 that's in the application, but according to the survey work that we have, it does show that it's 72 acres.
So the survey prior to the sale has it 67, and now you're saying it's 72.
Other way around.
Okay.
Other way around, I think.
It was 72, now it's
72 at the time of application, and that is the survey work that we have on file for this development. I can't speak to the acreage figure. I'm actually looking at the deed right now, which does not actually contain an acreage, so short of running that legal description, I can't speak to the property appraiser's website and the data on it.
Well, the boundary survey says 72.11 acres.
Correct.
Signed and sealed by, looks like Wade did it, so there's a boundary survey in our package.
So even if it turns out that there was a mistake, and it sounds like there's not a mistake, but even if it was, the proposal is for 1.96 homes per acre, correct?
Correct.
And so if it turned out that it was 60 acres or 50 acres, they're going to have to scale it back to 1.96 per acre, exactly as it's being proposed. And I hear conversation about the half acres, and you know, the proposal never says a minimum half-acre lot. It says 1.96. The zoning allows 2 per acre, correct? And they're actually slightly below that at 1.96. So as long as when they do their final site plan, if it's below the 1.96, it's consistent with what they've applied for.
Correct.
Is there another approval phase for this, or is this it?
This would go back before the Planning Commission for a preliminary plat approval, and then go through construction plan approval and then final plat
It's
approval.
changed from the way it used to be. It used to be the site plan, the preliminary plat, and the rezoning were approved at the PUD process. Now that's been broken out several years ago, I guess.
That's correct.
Repeat that last part is coming back.
We won't see it again.
Historic,
We won't
you
see
know,
it again.
years back before the code changed,
That's
if
the
any
planning
time an
commission
applicant
denies.
applied for a PUD, they would have to submit all engineering and construction plans as part of that and receive both preliminary plat approval along with their PUD approval in one fell swoop. That process has been broken up into multiple steps.
Which is a good thing.
Right.
But we only see it now, and then at final plat.
That's
Unless it's denied by the planning commission, then the applicant will probably appeal it to us.
Okay, one more point of clarification, and I spoke to you about this today, but I want to hear it in public, is about the PUD process. There's some concern, what I'm hearing is that it's not an appropriate PUD process, and either you or the attorney answer that, please. Explain why it can be just residential PUD.
Because this is not a sustainable community PUD, it is permitted to be simply residential without commercial components and include those recreation and open spaces as part of their development plan. If this were a sustainable use PUD, then it would be within the sustainable communities land use designation, and those elements would require things like commercial uses, job creation, and that sort of thing.
But that's not required in this.
That is not required in a standard PUD.
Mallard Pond was a PUD.
Yes. And that's a whole separate section in the Code of Regs.
That's correct.
Okay.
And open space requirements?
The mention of the 75% of the property that can be used for residential purposes, that's applied in a situation where an applicant is requesting a performance factor density increase, meaning that they've gone above and beyond the minimum code requirements and have requested up to 16 units per acre of land for development rights. And in that situation, they would be required to cluster the development or the residential uses of the property on 75% of the land, relieving the remainder in open space. That has not been requested in this situation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask about open space while we're on that subject, there was accusation that our open space is actually half of what's been identified. And I think that it was retention ponds or something like that. But I mean, I'd point out that Cascade Park is a retention pond as well, but it's also used very much for recreation. And so is that figure accurate? What do we have, 3.91 acres of open space? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I was trying to get back to that section. I'm sorry, I had the code pulled up so I could take a look at that. If I'm not mistaken, and the engineer can opine on his recollection of how they calculated that open space, it does include all of the buffers that they have identified along the boundaries of the property, conservation areas, and then the HOA common space areas.
So recreation open space is still just the 1.02 acres?
That's what it looks like.
That's what it appears, yes.
And what does our comp plan require
There
For
is
open
not a
space.
specific requirement for open space.
for recreation space? Didn't we put that in our recent plan?
You actually adopted those requirements into some new zoning categories into the code within the last
He's
year
talking about the
or
level of
two.
service standard, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the recreation area. We include, when we were doing town plan, this is trying to piggyback on the town plan type density. In the town plan, we require density, larger open space inside the town plan for recreational purposes.
Right, and that's contained within a zoning category in the Crawfordville Town Plan.
There's actually two zones, I guess.
And there's some other residential zoning categories that we included that into, but that is not what's being applied for here, those specific zonings, so that formula is not applicable to this project at this point.
There's two rec areas, Chuck, I stand corrected. One of them's .88 and the other one's the 1 acre.
One's a retention pond,
Homeowner recreation area.
Uh,
If you look to, I guess it'd be the
Yep. So you have
east, there's a note.
almost 2 acres, no, 1.9 acres of actual recreation area.
That's what it looks like. Which is a lot more than subdivisions.
That was calculated based on the 2.54 people per household with the 5 acres per 1,000 people in the comp.
The comp plan level of service.
Mr. Chairman, if I may have two additional questions.
Okay.
Summer, there was a statement that we were missing items, landscape plan, drainage plan. And you've already said that the development plan is consistent. Can you address that specifically, landscape, drainage?
Yeah, absolutely. So the development plan does show areas where landscaping may be installed, and also the applicant has provided a commitment to utilize the Florida Yards and Neighbors program, which does address landscaping, things like use of native species, reduction in fertilizer applications. So those areas have been identified in the file. As far as drainage goes, those areas also have been identified by the identification of stormwater ponds and roadside swells. This is, simply a drainage plan, a conceptual plan for how it will develop.
Still got to get it permitted through the state.
That is correct, and the construction plans will have to be approved. If this is approved this evening, will have to be approved going through our process. So those will get in much more detail as far as grade elevations for those ponds and those swales.
And it's not like the old days where you could just get a swale exemption and be done with it. Now you got to do attenuation, 100-year attenuation. So that's why you got to have ponds, and you can't just rely on roadside swales anymore.
So when people were addressing this, we talked about, it seems like there were discussion about buffer areas between the neighbors that are on large tracts and these small tracts.
There is not a provision in the PUD section or any other element in the county's code that requires buffers, residential to residential. There is a brief mention in the PUD about screening non-residential uses from residential, but that's the only time anywhere in the county's code that it's actually required to have a buffer between uses.
Yeah, but when we were in the comp plan, we were discussing having buffers as to get the people that were opposed to this to reduce their opposition.
But not between property.
And then there's not going to be no buffers. There's just
The applicant actually has proposed in this conceptual plan, I believe it's 15-foot wide buffers along the perimeter of the subdivision.
So it will have a vegetative buffer of 15 foot.
15 foot.
And you're saying that would not be required, but that's something they have added into their plan?
That is something that they have committed to as part of this plan, yes, but it is not required, correct.
Okay.
I have one additional question for the county attorney, if I may. There was a statement also that we haven't approved the PUD, I'm sorry, haven't approved the development plan, so we cannot approve the PUD. Now, the motion that's on the table is to approve the PUD and the development plan. Can we do both of those in one motion, in one meeting?
Yes, you can do them both at the same time. You typically do.
Okay, thank you.
Will the 15-foot buffer shown on here be required to be put in a conservation easement? Because, we had the problem with this on Hidden Meadows.
This will be something, unfortunately, that the county will not be able to enforce. It will be up to the homeowners association, and so there are provisions that will, staff will ensure that those are in place in the HOA documents as it goes forward. So
Don't want it in our name, because then if anybody gets hurt out there, guess who's going to get sued? Okay, I'm ready to vote. Y'all are.
Any other comments?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Passes 4-1.
Who voted against it?
I did. I've been against this from the beginning,
I
so
understand.
it's.
I still like you, though.
Okay. I didn't think it was compatible with the neighborhood, and I still don't think it's compatible with the neighborhood. Okay, item 25.
this item is a request for the board's approval of a resolution to close and abandon a 10-foot wide alley in the Crestwood subdivision.
To approve.
Second.
Any citizens? Nobody can tell me why that's there, so.
Yeah, currently there are no utilities in this 10-foot wide alleyway. It's never been opened or constructed, and there's no plan in the future for any public infrastructure improvements in that area. The homes in this subdivision have adequate access for any future utilities that may be installed along their primary road accesses. Staff's recommending approval. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
No comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right. Commissioner agenda items, none of those. County Attorney.
Nothing this evening.
Administrator.
Yes, Brandy King is going to get up and
Don't give a financial presentation.
she is giving, yeah, she's giving a budget presentation, go through it line item by line item.
He's just torturing you.
But anyway, today was the day that we turned the budget over officially to the county commissioners, and Brandy is going to brief you on that.
Yes, and this is just very brief, very high level. So I've submitted copies of the budget today to you. It's $90,710,878.
Any cents?
Zero.
I don't know why y'all won't round up just a little
That
bit.
is rounded. There's 0 cents.
9 million, you don't have to.
So our proposed budget includes a millage rate of 8 mills, 8,000 mills. I have the certification of the property values if you want some additional information on what the values came in, what the increase was. But I have scaled this down quite a bit to make it easier to digest. So what you can see is basically a snapshot of the current year through June, and then what the proposed budget is for 1920, along with the percent of the dollar amount of change and then the percentage of change. So it should be a lot less information to digest. I've removed all the historical and then the 5-year projections. I have it, of course, if you want to come see me. We can talk about it. I can go over it with you.
I'll talk about it.
But I was trying to make it a little easier to digest so much information.
What was the dollar amount increase with the keeping the millage rate at 8? How much more revenue
How much more revenue?
than this year?
It's about $758,000.
I don't need to know the exact number. That's fine.
About $758,000.
I just want to point out that increase in revenue is from new growth. That's not our citizens paying any extra taxes. That's new growth, 99.9% of it.
Now, I think we're talking about two different things here. So we would have had to stay at the rollback rate, and then we would have see the increase from the new growth. And it's different than what I've calculated because we're proposing an 8.000 millage rate. But for your information, we had 42 million, I'm going to round, in new construction growth. So we're at about almost 1.3 billion is our value total. So we picked up 42 million last year in value.
So at 8 mills, my personal property taxes should be about the same they was last year.
Roughly, you're going to see a slight increase depending on what your specific situation is and whether your property appreciated or depreciated. It's really specific. So you may see a slight increase, you may see a decrease. It's very specific. Roughly the same though for the average person.
Percentage the county collects is going to be the same. Thank you.
So, and from this point on, any changes that we make to the proposed budget will either be discussed in either a regular board meeting or a budget workshop, and they're going to be administrative type changes. We got another month of actual expenses, so we're reviewing our cash estimates, and it might go up or down a little bit. But all those changes are going to be brought forward to you either in a workshop or a board meeting.
Y'all could budget to turn the AC on in this room.
It's on.
Yeah.
Just a lot of hot air.
Maybe we need a budget to repair it, possibly.
Yes.
But and there is also some little notes throughout this document to kind of give you some little like Easter eggs to kind of help you out with understanding. There's a note where the double counting comes into effect with the constitutional officers, our business activities and what those are. So I've tried to add some different information in there. And like I said, if you want additional detail, I'll be glad to sit down and talk about anything else. And the last part is that staff has removed the economic development position as well as the risk manager. What we have added is 3 FTEs to fire rescue. So that's one body per shift, 3 shifts. So it's 3 FTEs because they have 3 separate shifts. So that's roughly, depending on who you get in those positions and what type of health insurance that they have, that's anywhere between $170,000 to $220,000 a year cost.
Soak that up?
Part of it. 38% of those employees will be charged to MSBU and 62% is charged to the general fund.
Fabulous.
Our call volume continues to go up in EMS, fire and EMS, and it's reached a point now to where we're straining to cover that call
You're
volume.
nixing the increase in your staff.
That is our proposal, yes.
Yes, and when we have our third budget workshop, we'll have Louis in here as well, and he'll have some additional backup and detail for what the new numbers are on how many times we're out of ambulances and that type of thing, because they do track that. So.
So we need to be buying another ambulance?
Y'all just approved an ambulance not too long ago, and we got it on order, but I believe, see how close I can get. I do believe we have an ambulance scheduled in
Yeah, we're
1920.
we already pre-ordered one.
Yes, well, we pre-ordered one, but I thought we had another one budgeted because that's with
Right.
the public safety. As soon as you buy one, you're ready for another one. No, we have it all on a reserve line right now. We have to look at your fabulous workbook, your 1-cent sales tax workbook.
Wonderful.
So anyway, that's all I had. Let me know if you want to sit down and go over this
Almost asked a
individually.
Well, you mentioned a summary. Are you is that in the budget that we received today, or are you sending us a copy of that?
Yes, everything is in here, and unless you want additional detail on what's in here, then I can expand that out and send it to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. That's
Okay.
all for me.
Thank you, Brandy.
That's all for county administrator. Any citizens to be heard? No? Discussion issues by commissioner.
I'll make a motion, we have a workshop to discuss this
Architectural standards.
architectural standards. Jessica, when's a good day?
September the 10th.
September 10th, what time? Give it an hour, maybe?
And that's a Tuesday, correct?
Huh?
That's the day we're moving?
It's a Tuesday, 4 o'clock. Okay with everybody? And I just want to make sure we contact, because you remember what happened with sign orders. Mike, you remember this. We do a sign order, somebody complain, we change it. Somebody complain again, we change it again. So let's go ahead and get the Chamber of Commerce here. I don't know if there's any of them here, but, and all interested parties.
You think an hour is going to give you enough time to hash it out?
If you're going to invite all those people, you're going to need...
All right, let's start at 3 then.
Okay.
That's my motion.
And, my personal opinion on this architectural stand is that they said right in the beginning that they were basing it on historical buildings. And I realize the jail is a historical building, okay? But I don't want to see our community...
Not a good standard, huh?
...in the jail. So
Right.
that's And if you start looking at the jail and look at those pictures,
Let's try to get this out to as many.
let's get it right.
Like David Harvey, he seems to be big into, the Crawfordville Town Plan, and other people that showed up when we were doing the Crawfordville Town Plan. So, I mean, you know who those usual suspects are, right? That came, make sure, 6 people? Okay, well, make sure.
I was one of them. I was one of them.
Make sure Ralph gets a copy.
Before I was elected.
So that's my motion.
Second.
Okay, do you need me to bring back an agenda item on adding that advertisement?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think they voted.
Hmm?
Need to vote on Randy.
Unanimous.
Oh, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next
That's
item I
5-0.
have is, planning and zoning currently has 9 members on it, right, Summer?
Correct.
Which in my mind is a little unwieldy. I recommend that we, and I guess I'll bring back an agenda item unless I can get a 5-0 vote on it, to take the cities off. And everything they're voting on has nothing to do with the city of South Choppy or the city of St. Mark's.
They have a representative because the commissioner serves
Correct.
that area already, so it
Correct.
makes sense. I mean, they really get double.
They get double
Correct.
count.
Double count.
And that
so-
would hone it down to 7. We gotta have, and I talked to Summer about this, we got a minority at large, we have 1 of each of us, and then we have a non-voting school board member, so that'd be 6 voting members. So, if you guys are fine with that, I'll make a motion to have.
I think it would be best to make an agenda item, that way people can come and speak on it.
I was
If we-
gonna have, my motion is to direct staff to bring the agenda item back. That
Sure,
way I don't have
that's
to do it.
fine. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So
Passes
now it's
5-0.
your agenda item.
Thanks, Randy.
Okay.
I like how you do that.
Directing staff to do things. I say, do I need to bring forward an agenda item to add that one sentence to the development code to, have comp plan amendments get the same type of advertisement as a zoning change?
I mean,
Fine with me.
I'd be okay with supporting that
I
tonight.
remember we just changed it recently when we did a major PUD revision, when they, on the flowers, you remember that?
Mhm.
And we changed the code to make them send notices out on that, so I don't have a problem with that, none.
Okay.
Using the same notice standard, I think we need to probably clarify what you're wanting to look at in notice
I wanna
standards.
make
Because
sure
a lot of
it-
land uses allow, right now it says 500 feet for residential, 1,000 feet for a commercial zoning change. So there's a lot of land uses that allow both residential and commercial zonings within them.
You're gonna bring it back
so
though, right?
The question is, do I need to bring it back, if she can bring it back?
He's
What
wanting to
does
do
it-
what you just did, Randy.
I want to do what you just did.
Well, we don't know exactly what you're proposing, so why don't you bring it back?
Okay.
And you can say, this is what I want to change, instead of Summer trying to figure it out for you.
Okay.
Well, I think he's saying just make it
Well,
match.
yours is saying make it matched. I think the thing is, though, is
Is it that simple? Just make it match?
She told me it was one
I just
one
need to know
sentence.
what distance to apply to it.
what distance?
Yeah, a 500-foot radius or a 1,000-foot radius.
Well, if it's got a commercial in it, it would be 1,000 foot, and if it's just residential, it'd be 500 foot.
I will say that the land use may allow for commercial, but we
Urban
may not
one allows
know.
commercial.
Like with the ones, both of the rezonings you saw this evening, both of those land use designations actually allow for non-residential uses. So there could at some point be potential for commercial development. You wouldn't know that at the comp plan stage.
You want to just make it worst case scenario?
I would go worst case scenario, making all of them
I
1,000.
know it's going to cost developers a couple $100, but that's all right. Get more people noticed.
Well, I was real disappointed that the people on
Yeah,
Jane
that's the
Drive
same
and
thing Randy
none of
just
them
did. They
would ever have
tried to
known.
get-
that
You need to
meeting.
get a 5-0 for me to draft it.
So, because they just, it's just advertised on the road, and look at where that road is.
And look at Chuck while you're doing it. If you want to work with Summer, I agree with you about the signage too. If the signage needs to be where the people that are affected by it can see it also.
Yeah, but how do you tell them where it's going to be?
We can only place the signage on the actual parcel, and in this case, it was on the lot that's providing access to it.
That's why I
That was
say
the
it's-
only access we had to even see it. Nobody else, if we would have gone to the back of that lot, onto the 138-acre piece, nobody would have seen it because it's behind a gate. So,
Where it is, it was just, for this situation, it's just not enough advertisement for the community use.
The mail outs would make a big difference.
The mail outs would make a big difference.
For 1,000 feet? You know how many houses?
Ma'am.
This is time for the board to talk.
Hold on. Did somebody make a motion to direct staff to amend the notice procedures?
Chuck did.
I can't make a
You
motion.
can't make a motion.
Make a motion.
Down part of being a chair.
No.
I tried to get that changed.
Well, I thought we said just take it to the worst-case scenario and go 1,000 feet.
You make a motion for it?
That's all, I'll make that
I'll
motion.
second it then.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. All right. Summer has her marching order.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
All right. That covers the commissioner discussion items. You have any, Mike?
Motion to adjourn.
No? We're done. Thank you, folks.
Man, it's hot.
That is ridiculous.
What do you think, Nanette?